Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be doing another quarterly reading goals check-in and talking to you about how my reading goals are going so far this year. So I do one of these videos usually every 3 months, so today I'm mostly going to be talking about how my reading goals have gone in April, May and June, and I'll link down below my goals wrap up for January, February and March, and also the video in which I set out my reading goals for 2020. So I have like a few general goals which I'm going to talk through at the beginning, and then I also have a little like monthly goals checklist where I tick things off as we go through the month, so I will get to that in the second half of this video as well. So let's get into the goals. I will start off with my general reading goal. So at the beginning of the year I set my Goodreads goal at 100, but I set my personal reading goal at 150. So if you're new here, to explain why those figures are different, I work in publishing, so I read a lot of books for work, and the books that I read for work I can't mark on Goodreads when I read them, but obviously I did read them. So what I do is I keep a separate list of all the books I've read, including books for work and books for pleasure, and then I mark the books I read for fun on Goodreads. So I want to read 150 books over the whole course of the year, but I acknowledge that a lot of them will be for work, so my Goodreads goal is set at 100, because I do also want to read lots of books that are for fun and not for work. So far up to the end of June, halfway through the year, I have read 105 books so far this year, and Goodreads thinks I have read 75 books, which means that I am 2/3 of the way through my reading goals halfway through the year, which I am very pleased with, because that kind of takes the pressure off for the rest of the year. Except that now I've read 105 books in the first half of the year, I'm like, well, obviously I can read 200 books this year, which I've never done before, and that would be really satisfying. So then I've just given myself extra unnecessary pressure, but that's not an official goal, and we'll see what happens. Another of my big goals for the whole of this year was a read your own damn books challenge. I wanted to and want to read more of the books that are on my shelves. Specifically, I want to read more of the books that are listed in this jar. So this is my TBR jar. Before Christmas 2019, I put the names of all of the physical books on my shelves in this jar. So the book titles in this jar are only books that I have owned since before Christmas 2019, and books that I have acquired since then. I don't mind that they're sitting on my TBR because I haven't had them very long, if you see what I mean. So at the beginning of the year, there were 55 book titles in this jar, and I said that over the whole course of the year, I wanted to get it down to 20 books, literally just the things in this jar. And then I also said that I wanted to get my overall physical TBR, like books I've had for a while listed in this jar and other books, down to 40 books. So the first half of this year, especially the last 3 months when I've been in lockdown with no access to libraries, have been very productive in terms of getting my physical TBR down, and actually there are now just 21 book titles left in this jar, which means I'm basically effectively at my goal, very nearly at my goal, halfway through the year, which I wasn't really expecting, which is really good. I'm really pleased with that. So there's 21 books in this jar, which means I think I could nearly read all the books listed in this jar by the end of the year. So I think I'm going to revise my target from 20 books in this jar by the end of the year to 5 books in this jar by the end of the year. To be honest, I think I can read all 20 books in this jar by the end of the year. The reason why I'm saying 5 is because there are a few books in here where I have plans to buddy read books with people, and I don't want to, like, the reason that I miss out on doing a nice buddy read with someone to be that I arbitrarily want to read it by December when I could read it in February, if you see what I mean. So I'm going to say 5 books left in this jar by the end of the year. I'm going to read the other 16 before the end of this year. That's my plan. We'll see if that happens. So in terms of my overall physical TBR, at the beginning of April, my overall physical TBR was 60 books. So those are just the books that I own on my shelves. It's not counting ebooks, it's not counting audiobooks, it's just the books I have physical copies of. At the beginning of April, it was 60 books. Then over the last 3 months, I have read 27 books that were on my physical shelves, which would bring me down to 33, which is fantastic and under my overall goal of getting my physical TBR down to 40 books. However, it was my birthday in May and I did acquire quite a lot of books. So my physical TBR is now back up to 49, but I'm not that unhappy with that, especially when there's now only 21 of those books that have been in my TBR for a really long time. But I am still hopeful that over the whole course of 2020 I will get that physical TBR number down before Christmas. I'm not going to say including any books I get for Christmas, but before Christmas I would like my physical TBR to be down to like 30 or 40 books, if not less. I think it'd be really satisfying to have a much smaller physical TBR. I think especially it would make me feel a bit more free in what I'm reading, what I can get out of the library, what new books I'm getting, and in general just mean that I could pursue like different reading projects beyond just trying to read the books that I own. I've already started thinking about like what my monthly checkbox things would be for 2021, and I feel like the more of the physical books that I have on my shelves I read, the more like ambitious I can be with other reading goals and other reading projects. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, I have lots of other reading plans in the year as well. You know, I have Jane Austen July this month, and I think I'm reading like 2 books from my physical TBR for that. And then when it's Victober, in October, I think I've got like 3 unread Victorian books on my shelves, and everything else I read will be a reread or something I'm getting out of the library or getting on ebook or buying new. So I won't necessarily get through very many books on my physical TBR that month, but I have a vague plan that in August I might do like a reading month of non-Victorian classics, when I read lots of classics that aren't from the Victorian period, and see how I got on with that. And that would tick off quite a few of the books on my physical TBR, as well as getting some things out of the library. And then in September I think I'm going to have a concerted like reading lots of books on my physical TBR month again, like I did in April. Not an official readathon this time, just me trying to get my physical TBR down. And then October obviously Victober. Then November is non-fiction November, and I think I'm going to try and read all the non-fiction books on my physical TBR. I think there are 5, excluding the 2 that I'm going to be reading for Jane Austen July. And then in December, I'm going to have another concerted effort to read books that have been in my TBR for a long time and try and get through the fiction, you know, books on my physical fiction TBR. So I have a plan for the rest of the year, and we will see how that goes. Anyway, another of my big goals for the year was to read the 6 books that have been in my physical TBR the longest, which were Wolf Brother by Michelle Paver, Number 11 by Jonathan Coe, And the Mountain Echoed by Carla Tosini, The Vore by B. Catling, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. So when I last made one of these videos in March, I had only read And the Mountains Echoed. I have now read 4 of those 6 books, so I've also read The Vore, which was not great, Number 11, which was great, and Wolf Brother, which was also great. So I've just got 2 books of the books that have been on my TBR for the longest to read, which are The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm hoping to read, or at least start, both of these in August. I'm sure one of the reasons why I'm toying with the idea of having a month of reading non-Victorian classics, or maybe non-British 19th century classics as a whole. Not going to sneak in any early 19th century British literature either. I'll have read some of that anyway in Jane Austen July. I've been meaning to get to both these books for a very long time, but I feel like they'll need a bit of dedication. But also there's quite a lot of like 20th century classics that I would really like to read that are quite short. So I feel like in August maybe I will like mix in some short 20th century classics with those 2 big French 19th century books, and also get to a few of the unread non-Victorian classics on my shelves. But anyway, this is supposed to be a reading goals review, not me talking about my reading plans for the next few months. So now I'm going to take you through my little goals reading checklist. So as you can see, I have 8 prompts, and I tick things off every month and see how I get on. Last year I ended up not ticking lots of things and finding a bit too much pressure. So this year I made the prompts easier, and I've definitely ended up ticking off a lot, and I feel like next year I need to do something in between, but there we go. I still find it very satisfying to tick something off every month, and I do think it's prompted me to read a few things that I might not have picked up in the particular month I did. So my first monthly prompt is to read a piece of Victorian literature every month. So you'll see in April I've written a half because I was listening to Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens for the whole of April, but I didn't finish it in April because it's very long. I finished it in May, so that was my half book for April, and then in May I finished off listening to Our Mutual Friend, and I also read The Odd Woman by George Gissing. Both of those were rereads for me, but I did love both of them. Our Mutual Friend is my favourite novel of all time, and The Odd Woman is pretty awesome too. And then in June I read Jill by Amy Dillwyn, which was another fantastic Victorian novel I would highly recommend. I've made a whole video on that, so I will link that down below. Then my second monthly prompt is to read a non-Victorian classic every month, so a classic that is not from the Victorian period. So in April I read quite a few. I read Lucia in London by E.F. Benson, which is a brilliant comic 1920s novel. I read The Mystery of the Blue Train by Agatha Christie, which was a reread and really enjoyable. I read The Inimitable Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, which I think is the second book in the Jeeves and Wooster series, and I've really enjoyed. P.G. Wodehouse is so hilarious. And then I also read The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, which I read for the readathon 18th Century April, and was a bit too silly for my liking. In May, I also read quite a few non-Victorian classics. I read Carry On Jeeves, another Jeeves and Wooster book, which I listened to an audiobook. And then I also read The Woman Novelist and Other Stories by Diana Gardner, which is a brilliant Persephone short story collection. And then I also read The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, which I buddy read with Leanne Rose. This was a brilliant early 20th century American classic, which I just loved. And then in June, I read Young Anne by Dorothy Whipple, which is a fantastic British book from the 1920s and a bit of a coming of age story, and just, yeah, so enjoyable. So I managed to tick off my non-Victorian classic every month and read more than one most months in the last 3 months, although I will note to myself that, again, I have fallen into my habit of reading lots of early 20th century British literature, so my non-Victorian classics reading is really very varied. I'm going to change up my classics challenges every month in 2021. Quite a few of those were books that I had on my shelves anyway, so you know, there we go. Another goal I have is to read a historical fiction novel every month, and I have read plenty of these in the last 3 months. So the historical fiction I read in April included Montmorency's Revenge by Eleanor Updale and Wolf Brother by Michelle Paver, both of which are children's historical fiction novels. And then I also read Death and Mr. Pickwick by Stephen Jarvis, Frog Music by Emma Donoghue, The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow, and A God in Ruins by Kate Atkinson. My favourite historical fiction novels from April were definitely Frog Music and Death and Mr. Pickwick, both of which were amazing. Then in May I read one historical fiction novel, The Gustav Sonata, which I didn't especially enjoy. And then in June I read 3 historical novels, The Soul Midwife by Ursula Benjamin, which was not fantastic, and then An Atlas of Impossible Longing by Anna Rada Roy, and The Confessions of Franny Langton by Sarah Collins, both of which were amazing and I really loved. I've also been trying to read a commercial women's fiction novel every month. I work in commercial women's fiction, and it's an area that I really enjoy but don't reach for as much as I could. I didn't end up reading a commercial women's fiction novel in April, and I only read one in May and June. I had been relying on the libraries a bit for these, so I slightly struggled with this month, though I did get a few audiobooks out from the library. So like I said, didn't read one in April. In May I read If You Could Go Anywhere by Paige Toon, which is one of the few commercial women's fiction books I had on my shelves. And then in June I listened to Solo by Jill Mansell on audiobook. Every month I also try and pick a book out of my TBR jar, and the last few months, because I've been really trying to get my physical TBR down, I've been picking out more than one and sort of reading through the things I picked out until the end of the month. So in April, when I was doing the TBR clear out, I picked out several books from the TBR jar, and I read Death and Mr. Pickwick and A God in Ruins, which I've already mentioned, and also Number 11 by Jonathan Coe. In May, the 2 books I picked out of my physical TBR jar were Ruins Wake by Patrick Edwards, which was a science fiction novel I really enjoyed, and also The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara, which is a fantastic and really moving novel set in the 1980s. And then in June, the 2 books I picked out of my TBR jar were The Soul Midwife by Ursula Benjamin and The Vore by B. Catling, neither of which were that successful, but there we go, at least they're off my TBR. Then I also try and participate in a buddy read or a read along every month. This is probably like my loosest goal in terms of I'm not that fussed if I don't do it every month, because obviously it depends on me reading with other people. So these happen when they happen, but it is nice to try and do lots over the course of the year. So in April I buddy read Frog Music and also The Other Bennet Sister with Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. Then in May, me and Marissa hosted a read-along of The Odd Women, so we were buddy reading that and also reading it with a lot of other people as well, which was really great fun. That read-along was really enjoyable. And then I also buddy read The House of Mirth with Leanne Rose. And then in June I haven't ended up doing any buddy reads, but you know, that's fine. Then I also have been trying to read a review copy every month, although I am now like running out of review copies on my shelves, so I might just kind of leave this goal more or less for the rest of the year. I got through the review copies on my shelves a bit sooner than I thought I would. So in April I read The Runaways by Fatima Bhutto and The Truth About Archie and Pie by Jonathan Pinnock and The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. All of those have been sent to me for review and all of which I really enjoyed. Then in May I read Ruins Wake by Patrick Edwards, which had been sent to me for review, which like I said was a really fantastic science fiction novel. And then in June, Jill by Amy Gilwin was a book that was also sent to me for review. So yeah, like I said, I think I only have like one book left on my shelves that was a review copy, so I think I'm going to leave this challenge for the rest of the year, but There we go. It was fun for the first half of the year. I got through some books that have been on my shelves for a really long time that have been sent to me for review. Maybe I'll end up getting more things for review in the future, I don't know. I'm not really requesting much at the moment because my shelves are very full, but there we go. Finally, I do have like a free choice prompt every month because there are always books that don't fit into the categories and I still like to be able to tick something off. So in April, the books that didn't fit into any category were a collection of short stories called Bedtime Stories, a YA Peter Pan retelling called Lost Boys, an audiobook sci-fi short story collection called Beta Life, and also Take Nothing With You by Patrick Gale, which was a beautiful contemporary literary fiction book about music. In May, the only book I read which didn't fit into any other category was Witch Week by Diana Wynne Jones, which is a children's fantasy novel. And then in June, I read quite a few things that didn't fit into any category. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, Wind/Pinball by Haruki Murakami, The Reservoir Taste by John McGregor, The History of Britain by Simon Sharma, and Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo Lodge. So there we go, those are all my reading goals and how they've been going over the last 3 months. I think that's all I wanted to say today. In general, I'm feeling pretty pleased with how my goals are going. I'm really determined to get my physical TBR and especially my physical TBR jar down this year, and I really think that I can, so I'm going to try really hard to do that by the end of the year. I think that's all I wanted to say for today. Do let me know down in the comments how your reading goals are going. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.